If the Tokyo metropolitan area were struck by a flood of comparable size at this moment, the scale of the resulting damage would be devastating. An area 60 kilometers north of Tokyo plays a major role in protecting the metropolitan area from flooding. As one of the largest reservoirs in Japan, it was created to prevent flooding by storing and retaining rising waters from the Watarase River, Uzuma River, and Omoi River, and keeping them from inundating the Tone River. This is the Watarase Retarding Basin. The Watarase Retarding Basin stretches over 4 prefectures, Tochigi, Ibaraki, Gunma, and Saitama, and has an area of 3,300 hectares, around 700 times the area of Tokyo Dome. This is one of the reservoirs within the Retarding Basin. It's known as Lake Yanaka. Yanaka is the name of a village with deep connections to the start of the Retarding Basin. This village was abolished 100 years ago. Let's look back over the history of the Watarase Retarding Basin. Yanaka village was established in 1898 when a number of neighboring villages were merged into a single village. Surrounded by the Watarase River, Uzuma River, and Omoi River, this area was frequently struck by flooding, but these floods also brought and deposited fertile soil. Then came the Ashio copper mine mineral pollution incident, Japan's first major cause of industrial pollution. A spearhead of Japan's drive to industrialize during the end of the 19th century, this copper mine was located near the source of the Watarase River. Shown here is the Ashio copper mine. From 1890s, frequent floods deposited mineral pollutants on the fields along the Watarase River, turning them barren. In the 20th century, the government took up this matter and decided to create a retarding basin to prevent flooding and mineral pollution. Yanaka village was chosen as the site of the retarding basin. A mass emigration of Yanaka villagers began in 1905. Most of those forced to relocate from their homes moved to neighboring villages. But some became involved in the development of Nasu and Hokkaido and moved there. On July 1st, 1906, Yanaka village was merged into Fujioka town and ceased to exist as a separate entity. Yanaka village had around 400 houses and 2,500 inhabitants. These villages were compelled to abandon their homes and land. After their relocation, how was the Watarase Retarding Basin constructed? Four years after Yanaka village was abolished, the largest flood ever struck the Kanto region, inflicting significant damages to the Tokyo metropolitan area. One result was that plans to build a retarding basin gained momentum from 1911. Construction focused on changing the course of the meandering river in its lower reaches. A new drainage canal was built in Fujioka town to allow the Watarase River to flow directly into the Akamanuma. Named the Fujioka Drainage Canal, this became the new course of the Watarase River. The courses of the Uzuma and Omoy rivers were also modified. Levees were raised to create a huge reservoir capable of holding back flood waters. Construction was completed in 1925. Floods were common afterwards. In particular, Typhoon Catherine, arriving in September 1947, devastated the metropolitan area, leading to dramatic changes in flood control for the Tone River. After Catherine, plans were formed to create regulating reservoirs in the Watarase retarding basin to store floodwaters more efficiently. In 1963, construction of these regulating reservoirs began. The number 1 regulating reservoir was built in 1970, the number 2 regulating reservoir in 1972, and the number 3 regulating reservoir in 1997. After many years, the Watarase retarding basin finally began operating as a key component of flood control for the region. Now, let's examine the mechanism of flood control in the Watarase retarding basin. Under normal conditions, wetlands and grasslands spread out across the basin. But during floods, muddy water flows into the retarding basin, reducing the volume of water flowing downstream. When the floodwaters finally recede, the drainage gate is opened to discharge water stored in the retarding basin into the river. The levee surrounding the entire retarding basin is called a surrounding levee. Separating urban areas from the retarding basin, this levee has a total perimeter of 30 kilometers. The levee along the 3 rivers is called an enclosing levee. It separates the rivers from the regulating reservoirs. Its critical regulating effect is demonstrated at the time of greatest danger, when floodwaters rise. An overflow levee is a part of the enclosing levee where the height of the levee is lower and covered with asphalt pavement. It allows river water to flow into the regulating reservoirs when floods drive water levels above a certain point. A waterway within the reservoir is created in the reservoir to quickly drain the water held back by the regulating reservoirs. During the flood, the drainage gate is closed to retain floodwaters. When the flood recedes, the gate is opened to allow water to flow out. The Watarase retarding basin retains water for flood control and water supply. The comprehensive development works for the Watarase retarding basin was established in 1973. A decision was made to create reservoirs that would provide additional storage capacity for flood control and supply water to urban areas. Yanaka Lake was provisionally completed in 1990 as Japan's first flat dam. The total storage capacity of the lake is 26.4 million cubic meters, 21 times the volume of Tokyo Dome. The Watarase Reservoir has 2 advantages over the dams in the upper reaches of the Tone River. The first is its large area of more than 8,000 square kilometers for collecting and storing water. Compared to dams that can't store water unless rain falls in areas upstream, the Watarase Reservoir can collect water from tributary streams, even in times of limited rainfall. The second advantage is its proximity to the supply point. It takes 2 days to deliver water from the dams in the upper reaches to the supply point, but only around 5 hours to deliver water from the Watarase reservoir to the supply point. The Watarase retarding basin provides water for the daily requirements of the metropolitan area. At any given time, it holds enough water to meet the water requirements of all Tokyo residents for up to 25 days. Various steps are taken to ensure water quality. The Yata River is separated from the Watarase River. Since domestic wastewater has led to severe water pollution in the Yata River is separated from the Watarase River. The reservoir gathers water only from the Watarase River, which is relatively clean. Water accepted into the reservoir is drained through the waterway within the reservoir into facilities for purification by the marshy reed field. At the purification facilities, the marsh reeds help purify the water. When they come into contact with the stalks of the marsh reeds, pollutants suspended in the water are adsorbed and precipitated. The nitrogen and phosphorus in the pollutants are eventually absorbed into the stalks and roots of the marsh reeds. In the next step, microorganisms begin breaking down the pollutants. Artificial floating islets in the reservoir planted with rushes and reeds provide fish with shelter and birds with nesting grounds. These islets also help maintain water quality. Trees and grass are planted along the lakeshore to strengthen the ecosystem and improve scenery. The reservoir is allowed to dry in winter to prevent musty odors. Draining water from the reservoir and exposing the soil to sunlight help reduce phytoplankton populations, which can generate a musty odor. Allowing the reservoir bed to dry improves water quality. For the following year, it also improves the quality of the reservoir habitat for fish, which return from various streams and ponds to repopulate the lake. In 2006, Half-Peak returned to the reservoir for the first time in 40 years, inspiring the local Fishermen's Association to resume the Ebisu Festival, a local event discontinued long ago. One event gives children the opportunity to see fish close up. Abnormal weather patterns in recent years have increased the urgency of flood control projects to safeguard the nation against super typhoons and heavy rain. The area along the Tone River is no exception. There are currently 8 dams in the upper reaches of the Tone River that help with flood control. But storage capacity remains inadequate for typhoons of the magnitude of Catherine. The Watarase retarding basin has yet to achieve its targeted flood control storage capacity. The residents of the area who experienced the terror of Typhoon Catherine are strong backers of continuing work on flood control projects, as well as conservation efforts in the retarding basin.
こう波がそれこそ山が動いてるようなねその波です。でそれがね堤防へこう時折ドサンドサンってこう打ちつけるんですね。そうしますとね堤防の上に立ってますとあれもう堤防がねブルブルこう揺れるんですね。いや本当ねもう恐ろしさっていうのはもう経験した人でないともう実感が湧いてこないと思いますね。
この堤防が決壊して津波のような勢いで家屋を押し流し 私が知ってる人が1名2、3日